How's it going, guys? This is TechWork Tactical. I'm back with something a little different. I really want to stick in the vein of preparedness for right now. I've already had this stuff around the house for a bit. With everything that's going on, when the almighty beer flu went around, I decided that I wanted to keep some more stuff in my house than I reasonably would because I wasn't going out very often, everything was shut. So I started to become a little bit of an impromptu prepper. I was very much into preparedness from a different mindset of the pew pew community, not so much the food community. I wanted to venture into it though, and this was a fantastic and very affordable way to go about it. Everything here, these were broken up. It was a larger package, but that's just an example. Everything else is still in the package the way I got it. Everything here is less than $15, and some of it is even lower than 10. I think that spam actually was lower than $10 for me at the time, and it's got a decent amount of cans in there. I got the low sodium for a reason. Normally I would go full sodium because if you're sweating and something like that, and if the power goes out or the worst happens, you're probably going to be sweating and you're going to want to replace those salts. It's actually very good for you in a certain way. However, I will be covering that in a different portion as to why I get low sodium. The rest of it is just a simple protein to have around the house. Chicken breast can be put in a million different things. Tuna can be used a bunch of different ways. Spam, same. Little chicken fingers, the same. It's something that you can put up on a shelf. Generally, the chicken breast is good for about 3 years. Spam has a lifespan of only God knows how long, because I don't think anyone has really put it to the test yet, and I'm not going to be the first one to do it. I know that in times of desperation, people have had, been snowed into cabins and stuff and found an old can of spam that had been in a cupboard for who knows how long, and it was fine, and it helped them survive. So, again, much rather have it than not. It's something that it can be easily modified. Everything on here can be put into something else. It can be made into soups. It can be made into, depending on where your cooking skill is at, pizza. If you have stuff around your house that you can make an impromptu dough and have a way to cook it, you can make a pretty decent pizza. You can just grill it up as it is. You can sear it in a pan. You can make stir fry with it with other vegetables. That is also very commonly stockpiled in a cupboard. Just not even in a time of danger or anything like that. And most people in their home would probably have a can of corn, a couple of other cans of various vegetables. Well, if you throw all that in a pan and you stir fry it, you can make yourself a pretty hearty meal with stuff from just a cupboard. It's something that's very handy to have around. That $5 chicken breast at both Sam's Club and Costco is great, but it needs refrigeration. And if something terrible does happen, your fridge, depending on the model and all that, and I'm not going into it, is good for maybe 3 days. If you're really stingy about opening it, it's maybe 3 days. Freezer, call it 4 or 5 if you're also stingy and don't open it. However, what I would suggest is if everything is going to complete pot, I think you should actually take the stuff out of your freezer, unless it's like a deep freezer, and prepare it if possible. Because that way you can throw it in the fridge and you can go through it over the course of those 2 to 3 days. Now, obviously, if your thing is completely frozen solid with, steaks, you're probably not going to sit there cooking steaks all the time, although that would be great, and also go through it. I'm a single person. I can only put so much up and have it be a reasonable amount for a daily thing to dip into and use. That's why I started getting things like this that came in individual cans, because I can open up one of these and I can make it into something with other things that is generally kept around every standard home in America. And that's what I like about it. It's really getting back to stretching your imagination and what you can really do with pantry staples. How many things can you do with a can of corn and various other things? You actually can do a lot. Weirdly enough, old cookbooks are like the go-to for this. So many people get sucked into what something is named. Just because something is called like the preparedness cookbook doesn't mean that it's all encompassing. There's a lot of different old cookbooks from times of not plenty that maybe like your grandparents, your great grandparents had, that are probably going to also be pretty good and not be very much in line with more modern cooking taste. There's different channels that have done stuff like this. Depression era cooking is one that comes to mind. Weirdly enough, there's a really weird guy on TikTok that he made like a sauerkraut chocolate cake, and it's supposed to be good. I never in a million years, and as someone who went to a cooking school, would think to put sauerkraut inside of a chocolate cake. Looking back on it now, it makes sense, but I never thought of that. But someone's great grandmother back in the day, when all she had was some pantry ingredients and sauerkraut from last harvest, tried it, and it turned out to be fantastic. So now it is now written down for us to use when everything is not going great. Don't ever underestimate the sort of knowledge that you can gain, not only from older people, but from older informational outlets. Some things nowadays have been disproven. When it comes to food, though, it tends to be pretty much in the same vein. Like, yeah, we're not making the same sort of things that we were in the 60s and the 70s, where everything is 18 pounds of butter and half a quart of cream, but it can still have a lot of good things in there that you can look up. For instance, there's an old recipe that I really enjoy. Most people call it coq au vin, but there's an easy way to get around it, which is to take literally your $5 Costco chicken, butcher it, put it in a pot, and then cut up an onion, a carrot, and some celery, and it's an easy way to get to it, because then all you have to do is dump in like half a bottle of wine or thin it out to your taste, and then heat. It's a fantastic way for an easy meal. And that's basically all it is. Sure, it's not as French, it's not classical, but you know what? It's probably going to be really good, and if you're really hungry, you probably aren't going to care very much as long as there's food going into your stomach. Your standards drop significantly. And you know what? That's okay. Because if anything, collectively as Americans, we can do with maybe missing a meal, maybe two. But you know what? 8 months is a long time. It's almost a year. So the real question is, do you have enough that you could skip every other day and still have a meal, a substantial meal, where you are full? Because the answer for most people is no. And that's very sad. Not just because it means that there's people out there right now that don't have cupboards that can store these things or even afford these things, but most people choose to be blissfully ignorant because it's nice living in that world. Why would you want to think about all the depressing things that always bring you down? Well, I kind of always have. So it kind of surprises me that it took me this long to kind of get to a point like this, where it's so easy to go next door or down the street or a short car ride or maybe even a long car ride depending on where you are, and end up in a place that's stacked literally to the ceiling with food of every shape and size and color and place of origin. There's stuff at Costco that's made in China and shipped here. Yesterday I had a thing of dried mangoes, and I was like, man, these are really good freeze-dried mangoes. I looked on the back; they were grown and froze-dried in China, and then shipped here. Now that's genius because it's a massive upsale, because it can do great on backpacking trips. But also, they don't have to worry about all that weight when they're shipping it over, and they don't have to worry about it spoiling. So and that's a very smart thing, but it does bring into question the sort of conditions that those things may have been grown, harvested, and taken apart and freeze-dried at, which makes me a little skeptical, but you can do that. This is a very deep rabbit hole to go down, and this is kind of just the easiest way that I found to go about it as someone who just goes to a grocery store once per week. Imagine that if you go to a grocery store, you're getting food for maybe you plus one other person for a week. That's a great way to start. An even simpler way, the easiest way I've ever thought to get people into preparedness is, do you have something that you buy once or twice per week that is shelf stable? Like you can put it in a pantry or in a cupboard or whatever with no power and it'll be fine. The answer for most people is at some point, yes. Fine. That's perfect. Buy 2 of them. And the next time you go food shopping, buy another 2. And if you're wondering why, it's because every time you go food shopping, you're putting another one of your favorite thing back. And don't get burnt out on it either, because it is entirely possible. I did that when I was younger. I got burnt out on corn because I would always buy an extra thing of corn whenever I went grocery shopping, and I got completely burnt out on it. So do not